Welcome to an episode of Rediscovered Movies. I'm your host, Nomfanelo. The film that I'll be covering today is Emma. Emma is a 2020 British period romantic comedy film. It is based on the 1815 novel of the same name by Jane Austen. The film is directed by Autumn de Wilde. This marks her feature film directorial debut. She has previously directed music videos for artists such as Florence and the Machine. The film is written by Eleanor Catton, who wrote the novel called The Rehearsal. The film stars Anya Taylor-Joy, Johnny Flynn, and Mia Goth. Here is the synopsis. Following the antics of a young woman, Emma Woodhouse, who lives in Georgian and Regency era England and occupies herself with matchmaking in sometimes misguided, often meddlesome fashion in the lives of her friends and family. It was released in theaters in the UK on February 14th, 2020, and then it had a limited release in North America in theaters on February 21st. The budget for this movie is 10 million. In regards to box office, it made over $27.3 million worldwide. It domestically opened at number 25 with $234,482. It was beaten by films including Sonic the Hedgehog, The Call of the Wild, and Birds of Prey. In terms of critical reception, it has a 3.7 rating on Letterboxd. It was nominated for two Oscars, including Best Costume Design. At the time of this recording, it is available on demand, so check your local provider. Okay, let's get into first discoveries. I believe around the time this movie was about to release, I did see some promos for this movie online. And with like a movie like this, it's not something that I gravitate towards for the most part. Because while growing up, I was not a fan of like period pieces, to be honest, because at the time I thought they were boring. But as I grew up and as I've watched more diverse range of films, I became more open to period pieces. So as I was like trying to compile a list of like films to cover, I decided, you know what, I'll take a chance on this movie. So I have not read any of the Jane Austen books prior to this movie, nor did I see any of the adaptations of her works prior to this movie. So I know that there is a big fan base in regards to Jane Austen's works and all that stuff. There's that. But I've heard, yeah, of Jane Austen and all that stuff. So yeah, I figured like, I wanted to explore like the author and her work. So with this movie, as I decided to check it out for this podcast. So I rented the movie on Cineplex Store to watch because I got a voucher when I saw a movie at Cineplex. And then I later on decided to, as I was browsing Sunrise Records, I saw the movie was on sale. So I decided, you know what? I'll buy this movie. So I watched the movie for the first time. I was like, okay, I wasn't really sure what to think of it, to be honest, because I think it's one of those movies that has a lot of style when it comes to its aesthetic, like the visuals and all that stuff. But when it came to the writing, the story, and all that stuff, or the substance part, it just did not land for me. So I decided, you know what, I'll rewatch this movie again. And as I rewatched it, my feelings have softened for this. Like I still find like it's an okay movie, but I don't know if it's something that I will watch on repeat viewings, to be honest. Because I love like how this movie looks. It reminds me of eye candy. A filmmaker that comes to mind in comparison is Emerald Fennell. If you've seen her previous films, such as Promising Young Woman and Saltburn, she has a very strong aesthetic when it comes to colors, the visuals for her movies, and so forth. So, in a way, like watching this movie reminded me of Emerald Fennell's work that I've seen thus far. And and yeah, I believe the director Autumn de Wilde has a background in photography, and yeah, it clearly shows of how, in terms of how things are framed and all that stuff. So yeah, I really appreciate this movie from an aesthetic standpoint. But when it comes to like overall as a movie, it's a bit hit and miss for me. So, and as like an adaptation of as a Jane Austen novel, I find it's not bad. I mean, clearly it does have the cliches from the romance genre, but I would say this one is worthwhile. So let's get into the highlights. So it seems that with uh, this adaptation, they wanted to make it modern but still keep it period. Because I don't know how it went down when it came to the original source material, but with this movie, there was a lot of humor in this movie and a lot of like wittiness, and all that stuff. So I kind of like appreciated that. And in regards to the modernness of it all, I think the ending kind of pointed was illustrated when when Knightley and Emma became a couple, he decides to sacrifice, his life to essentially move with Emma and be close to her father. Because since this is a period piece, I imagine that it will be the other way around, where the woman would sacrifice everything, leave her family, friends, all that stuff behind to be with their partner. So again, I don't know like if that was in the original source material, since I have not read the book, but I thought that was a nice touch for this movie. And while I was watching this movie, I noticed, yeah, there was a lot of familiar faces. Like, I obviously knew Anya Taylor Joy. Obviously, it was nice that she got to do something that was more comedic, because I've previously seen her in a more like serious films such as Split, Last Night in Soho, and so forth. So I thought it was a nice change of scenery based on what I've seen of her work. So, and she did a great job in this movie. I would say all the cast did a good job. But in terms of familiar faces, so Johnny Flynn, he plays George Knightley. I recognized him from the Ripley miniseries that's on Netflix. So yeah, I thought he did a good job playing the love interest. Mia Goth was in this movie. I was kind of surprised, to be honest, that she was in this movie, because I'm sure most people would recognize her from her more recent works, such as Pearl, like that, the X trilogy, like the horror films. So I thought like Anya Taylor Joy was a nice change of scenery for Mia Goth, like to see her in a more like comedic light. Miranda Hart as Miss Bates, like she is hilarious. Like her character is like the comic relief in a way. And of course, I recognize her because she was in that Melissa McCarthy movie Spy, where she played Melissa McCarthy's friend slash confidant. And Bill Nighy as Mr. Woodhouse was great, and seen him in all like bunch of stuff such as Living, Pirates of the Caribbean, Love Actually. Also, too, in this movie, Josh O'Connor as Mr. Elton. See his character in this movie. Oh boy, like he's hilarious, but his character in a way kind of gives off like the creepy vibes of how he's presented. And it was like an interesting turn that his character makes, like when he decides to profess his love to Emma during their carriage ride. That whole scene, but yeah, like, it was nice to see him from what I've seen in a comedic light because I've seen him in more serious stuff. Challengers most recently comes to mind, and also too in this movie, Calum Turner as Frank Churchill. I don't think I've seen any of his previous works, but I keep seeing him popping up in a couple stuff that has blown up, such as the Fantastic Beasts movies, The Boys in the Boat, and all that stuff. So yeah, he also was great as the love interest to Emma's character. Also, too, Rupert Graves as Mr. Weston. I obviously recognize him from the Sherlock TV series. It's been a while since I've, seen that series. That's the British version, not the American version. And also, too, lastly, Connor Swindles as Robert Martin, who's like the love interest for Harriet. And I remember like seeing him in Barbie as Will Ferrell's. I don't know if he's the assistant character, but essentially was working underneath Will Ferrell's character in that movie. And also, too, many would know him from Sex Education. So, yeah, a lot of familiar faces in this movie. I would say, like in a way, it's like an all-star cast, even though like the people for the most part are not high profile, but of course they're recognizable. And also, too, as a highlight, I thought Emma as the protagonist is interesting. And so, if you've seen the poster, but also too, it mentions in the titles that she is handsome, clever, and rich, and I'd say those words are pretty accurate to describe her character. Because yeah, she is. Charming, and she's very clever when it comes to her matchmaking skills, and of course she's wealthy and all that stuff. So I thought, yeah, she in a way she's a delight to watch because in ways she knows what she wants. She's not really too forthcoming when it comes to her feelings and all that stuff, but she does have display her vulnerability at times, like when it comes to like her interactions with her father, Mr. Woodhouse. I would say Harriet at times, and of course Mr. Knightley, mainly like towards the later half of the movie. And as a matchmaker, I don't know, like I would call her professional. I don't think that's the intention here, but I kind of see it more as a hobby. So I thought, yeah, she's not bad as the matchmaker, but I do think she kind of puts her personal stuff when it comes to displaying those skills, particularly when she's trying to match Harriet with Mr. Elton and keeping her away from Mr. Martin and all that stuff. But yeah, Emma is quite the charming character. And also, too, as a highlight, I enjoyed Emma and Harriet's interactions as friends. It's you could easily argue that Emma is manipulating Harriet when it comes to Harriet's romantic endeavors and all that stuff. But I do think she does care at the end because like when we see like for instance like when Harriet is left alone, like she thanks Emma thanks Mr. Knightley for dancing with Harriet and all that stuff. And yeah, throughout the movie, like Emma does show that she cares for Harriet, like she's not selfish and all that stuff. And you could say, yeah, with the Harriet character is very naive when it comes to the romance and her interactions with Emma. But I do think, in a way, their friendship works. But you could argue that it's probably not the best. And the love triangle between Emma, Mr. Knightley, and Churchill is interesting. I mean, if you know the genre and the conventions, I mean, yes, it's easy to predict the outcome, where like Emma ends up with Mr. Knightley over Mr. Churchill. And I enjoyed like the love hate relationship between Emma and Knightley, like mainly during the first half of the movie. So in a way, like they're both playing hard to get, but it's no surprise that after they danced with each other, that there were sparks between those characters. And what else? And yeah, like too, when like Mr. Churchill and Mr. Knightley, when they first interact, clearly there is like tension between them, but they don't want to admit that because both of them are Emma's love interests and all that stuff. So so yeah, I thought that was an interesting exchange between those characters. And yeah, that was interesting to watch. And also too, I enjoyed, yeah, like it's funny that Emma becomes jealous of Jane Fairfax once Jane plays the piano in front of everyone. Like she feels threatened by Jane, and like, and I'm kind of glad that, because easy like for when they do stuff like this to make the character to be like an outward villain. And I kind of glad like with this movie it doesn't go that route. Again, it could be that's how it is with the adaptation, but but they're not buddy buddy, of course. But I'm just glad that there was no cat fight or any of the bitterness between them. Like it's more subtle as opposed than being like overt with that stuff. And I enjoyed the score. Like the score was quite, I would say, like whimsical. Like with the motifs that they used throughout the movie was quite enjoyable. But and in a way, like I guess it matches, you know, Emma's traits and all that stuff. So yeah, I would say it's quite enjoyable with the score. And as a scene, one of the scenes I enjoyed was that after Emma insults Mrs. Bates during the later half of the movie, Mr. Knightley, like he rightly, you know, criticizes Emma for essentially hurting Miss Bates' feelings and all that stuff, and in a way it's kind of funny that like Emma's trying to like dismiss that, even though she clearly knows that she was wrong for doing that. And I thought like as a scene that was quite enjoyable, and it shows that, you know, that Emma, I guess, in a way is dismantled as like the queen bee, as it's described. And forgot to mention this earlier, but when Emma like tells Harriet, quote, "You must be the judge of your own happiness," I thought those were some nice, wise words, because it's easy for Harriet to just outwardly just, you know, follow Emma's directions and all that stuff, but I'm glad that Emma just, you know, tells her like, no, you need to decide for yourself whether you want to pursue Mr. Elton or go with Mr. Merton and all that stuff. So that's pretty much my highlights for this movie. Now, in terms of lowlights, I don't have too many. I do want to note that at times, I don't know if it's because like it's a period piece or just the way that the film was structured. I find at times it was a bit slow with the pacing, particularly for me when it came towards like the later half of the movie. It could have been tightened here and there, but yeah, that's what I had for a low light. Also, too, I want to talk about Miss Bates. So essentially, throughout this movie, she keeps like interacting or like trying to pursue like Emma to tell her some information and all that stuff. And I just wondered, what is her deal like with this movie? Now, maybe in the book it's more fleshed out with that part, but I just wasn't too sure on Miss Bates' intentions. Like, does she want to become friends with Emma despite the age gap, or does she just want to be like accepted amongst like Emma and her peers and stuff because Emma is wealthy while Miss Bates is from a lower class? I'm not too sure on that. I just wish that part was more clear. Also, too, as a low light, so the Westons later reveal in the movie that with Mr. Churchill was secretly engaged to Jane, and apparently they kept it a secret until his aunt died. And I just wondered though, like first off, why was that revealed through conversation? Because since Emma seemed to be quite serious with Churchill, it would have been right for Churchill to tell Emma that like, hey, I'm engaged to someone else. This is not going to work out, and all that stuff. And then also too, I just wish there was more frustration over that. Like Emma could have been frustrated over hearing that news, but I don't know. It seemed like that was just brushed off towards the side. I don't know. Again, this could be how it went down in the book, or this could have been a creative change. I don't know. But I just felt that was just weird to just say that through conversation and just move on. Also, too, with Mr. Martin, so I just wondered though why his character doesn't say anything. Now, perhaps that could have been in the book, but it was just weird that he doesn't say anything at all. Now, maybe when during that scene early in the movie, when when Emma and Harriet are inside that store shopping and run into Mr. Martin and his sisters, maybe he said something. I don't recall, but he's pretty silent in this movie, and I just wondered why. Like at least like give him something to say, like when he and Harriet finally embrace, or is he supposed to be a very shy character that can't communicate effectively and has to resort to letters, which is why he wrote the letter to Harriet? I don't get that choice, to be honest, whether that was in the book or if it was made for this movie. I just did not get that choice at all. And then also, too, as a low light, when during the scene, this was after when Emma rejects Mr. Elton's advances, Harriet is like happily slicing this flower that's structured as a cake with a bunch of women. I'm just wondering like what is this? Is this supposed to be some sort of a game? Because they're all excited over, and it looked like she places a coin on top. So I just don't get what is this supposed to be though? Because like how is slicing a flower exciting? I don't know. I don't know. All right, let's get into trivia, some fun facts. So, there was a lot. Here's a select few that I will share. So, Apparently, the film was offered to Juho Kuosmanen, the director of Jaime Levamis, which won the Uncertain Regard Prize at Cannes Film Festival in 2016. He declined to make Compartment Number Six, which came out in 2021. And I apologize if I mispronounce any of those names. So, also, too, the director decided the film's title should include a period to signify it being a period piece. Oh my goodness! Because I think, as a stylistic choice, I was like fine with it, but to show this a period piece, I'm like, no, 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 because I believe, there was another adaptation of Emma that came out in the 2000s, I believe, of Gwyneth Paltrow. That didn't have a period towards it. I don't know. I don't get that choice, the period to be a period piece. Also, too, so Anya Taylor-Joy, she said in an interview with The Sun, quote, "I am the first ugly actress to play Emma, and I can't do this." When revealing she almost quit her starring role on the first day of shooting. She also added, quote, "I have never, and I don't think I will ever think of myself as beautiful. I don't think I'm beautiful enough to be in films. It sounds pathetic. And my boyfriend warns me people will think I'm an absolute D word for saying these things, but I just think I'm weird looking." I mean, that's unfortunate because beauty is subjective, of course. So I think, yeah, she's a good looking actress and all that stuff. So, yeah, that's all I'll say for that. Also, too, neither Emma nor Mr. Knightley is wearing gloves during their dance together, while the other characters are wearing gloves while dancing. And the director, Autumn de Wilde, said that she wanted them to have bare hands. She cleared it with the film's etiquette expert and was allowed to do that because the characters had just eaten dinner where they would have removed their gloves. It added to the sexual tension between Emma and Mr. Knightley during the last dance. That was interesting. Also, too, the soundtrack features many a cappella recordings of folk songs by artists like Maddie Pryor and the Watersons. The Wild had an immediate conception of the film's music being rooted in folk music. She also wanted the orchestral score to emulate Sergei Prokofiev's Peter and the Wolf, where each character had a theme that personified him. Interesting. In the film, Jane Fairfax, played by Amber Anderson, outshines Emma by performing the third movement from Mozart's Piano Sonata Number 12 on the forte piano. A trained pianist, Anderson had to relearn the piece to adapt her technique to the period instrument's shorter keys. Interesting. Anya Taylor-Joy, Anderson, and Flynn all sing on screen in the film. Taylor-Joy took pains to explain that her performance of "The Last Rose of Summer" used an affected style that she imagined Emma Woodhouse would use to charm her audience. Okay. And then lastly, the poster, the main one and the ones that feature each of the characters, was shot by the director herself, as she is also a photographer. I mean, obviously, it makes sense. And all right, lastly, should this movie be rediscovered? Now, here's what I'll say for this. So, if you're a fan of Jane Austen's works, if you love period pieces or romantic period pieces, I would say, yeah, this movie is for you. For me personally, I didn't mind this movie. So, I would say, yeah, check it out if you want to. It's not something that I would watch on multiple times, to be honest. Like, it has its moments here and there, but I say it's enjoyable. So I would say, sure, check out this movie. All right, that pretty much concludes this episode of the podcast. You can find me on Instagram, X, YouTube, and Linktree at Nomfanelo. You can find the podcast on Instagram, X, YouTube, and Linktree at RD Movies Pod. If you'd like to support the podcast, you could visit buymeacoffee.com/RD Movies Pod to donate. On the Spotify app, you can answer the featured poll, leave a comment, and rate the podcast. On Apple Podcasts, you can leave a review and rate the podcast. You can submit questions, comments, or suggestions by email, which is rediscoveredmovies@gmail.com, to be featured on the after show, which will air after the season finale. So I want to say thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to catch you on the next one.